The Blast from Our Past Network.
Podcasting After Dark presents TV Obscura, a deep dive into underrated and unknown television shows from our youth. Cartoons, sitcoms, cop shows, and much more. Sit back and enjoy some nostalgic fun with TV Obscura.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Podcasting After Dark presents TV Obscura. I am 1/3 of the TV Obscura team, Corey Stevenson, aka Sleazy C. Joined with me, as always, is Zach Schaefer, aka The Snackage, aka The Total Snackage, aka Tiny T. And we also have every episode of TV Obscura except for the very, very first one. We are joined by A. Diallo Jackson, aka The Armageddon. Gentlemen, it feels great to be recording again after a long hiatus for us. Ladies and gentlemen who are listening probably didn't notice much of that because we've been putting content out every week, but it's been a while since all three of us have had a chance to talk face to face, and boy, oh boy, do I need this. So I'm excited. Diallo, what you been up to for the past month, my dude?
Not a lot.
You know what? I'll take that over what I've been doing, so.
I did do the top 5 sword fights over on.
Is one of them the penis scene in Skin Deep?
Definitely was not that scene. I did not pick that one.
I love that scene.
Yeah, I saw that one. The Blast from Our Past. So you were over there with Adam and John.
Adam and John.
Yeah. So everyone go check out the Blast from Our Past, and I think that episode dropped about 3 or 4 weeks ago, something like that. It was a bit ago. Zach, you're busy, my friend. You have a new dog.
My gosh, I got a new puppy named Fozzie,
Pound
as in
puppies.
Fozzie Bear, and super adorable, but she's 5 months, and you know how those babies are, baby. They keep you on your toes, but whew, daddy, it's been a wild time since we last saw each other traveling and dodging COVID like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix or Trish Stratus in the WWE. She's back, baby, for at least one more match. For one more match, allegedly.
They always come back for one more, right?
For one more. Yeah, I saw.
If they're alive.
Yeah. Speaking of TV Obscura, since we last recorded, Vince McMahon is basically gone for life.
Yeah.
So, gee, you think the guy who profited off exploiting people possibly exploited people in real life? No. Really? We'll have to save that for a wrap-up after dark, exclusively on Patreon. So for all you Patreon listeners, go check that out. If you're not a Patreon subscriber, please consider becoming one because it's worth every penny.
And it helps keep the lights on at all of our studios and having us keep producing great content like this one. So, or I assume, because we haven't actually recorded this episode yet.
We'll
but
find
all the
out
other
in about
ones have
60
been great.
seconds.
So, I guess the theme of this episode is animated teams. Not that we haven't done a collection of animated teams before, but that I kind of requested us to do a animated show to sort of get back into things because they are a lot easier to prep for than our normal like hour-long, discussions. So we're doing back-to-back animated stuff. The last TV Obscura that we had was an animated one, and this one's an animated one as well. So that means next month we'll do a live-action one, and we'll figure that out. But right now, we are going to talk about, first up will be Diallo, discussing Battle of the Planets, a.k.a. G-Force, a.k.a. Gatchaman, 1978 through 1980. Zach will then be talking about Bionic Six, which was from I think it was just 1987, right? It wasn't 2 seasons?
Yes.
Okay.
AKA
Bionic Six.
Bionic Six.
AKA $6 Million Man, AKA $6 Million Woman, AKA
Bionics.
Bionic
Six.
Six.
And then I'm covering C.O.P.S. 1988
not
through
Cox,
89.
but Cops.
AKA Cyber C.O.P.S. when it was re-released in 1993
Oh, snap.
because the TV show C.O.P.S. had already taken that name.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Bad
yeah.
boys.
Yep.
And AKA Cops and Robbers from the toy line.
That's right. So this 2 of the 3 of our shows have an AKA. Well, Zach definitely pounded the square peg into the round hole for Bionic 6. But
I do. Everybody's like, that toy is ruined. And I'm like, that toy just became more usable for a wider audience.
so
And it's teams, by the way, just in case Corey might have said teens. He said teams. We're not doing teens.
I really tried on the second time I said it to really enunciate because it
Teams.
did sound like teens the first time. But yeah, this is teams, a group of people, not an age range.
Hey, guys, we're going to talk about kids today.
Oh
What?
my. And we're done here, ladies and gentlemen. It is over. Diallo, you want to kick us off with some Battle of the Planets?
All right, here we go. Battle of the Planets. It
Gotta catch 'em all.
started, it ran for 85 episodes in the United States. It ran for 85 episodes from 1978 to 1980. It was in syndication initially up until 1980, and then it ran on TBS, I think, until like the mid 80s. So there's a long, convoluted history about this show. This was actually the second iteration of it that appeared, the first in the United States. The original was called Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, Kakaku Ninja Tai Gatchaman. And
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive, Diallo.
Good job, buddy.
I know who I'm going with, the Benihana now.
It was produced by Tatsunoko Productions in 1972 from 1974. So this is old school. And it ran for 105 episodes, which is actually pretty...
That's a lot.
quite a few episodes for only like 2 or 3 seasons. So... The Battle of the Planets starred 5 teenagers who lived in Center Neptune beneath the sea, who were called into action by a robot named 7-Zark-7 and went on missions in their ship the Phoenix into outer space to fight Zoltar and his sister Mala Latraz and their evil organization Spectra. This was a change from the original, in that there were 5 teenagers who kind of kicked it wherever they wanted and wherever they happened to be, and they were called into action by Professor Nambu, a very human man, and they went on missions in their ship, the God Phoenix, around the world to fight Berg Katse and their evil organization, the Galactor. So they're basically the same, but slightly different.
Controversial. Is this controversial, Diallo?
Yeah.
Is this going to be a controversy?
Yeah, it will turn into a controversy. There's a lot of gatekeeping keeps coming up for me lately. So there's elements of that goes into it. But
Can you explain gatekeeping really quick? What is gatekeeping, just for everyone that doesn't know what that is, myself included?
yeah, I don't know if I'm the right person, because I'm not going to give the right definition, because I don't have the same view on
What's your
gatekeeping.
definition, though?
So gatekeeping is sort of like it's the phenomena where you feel like you own something, and like a TV show, Marvel Comics or whatever, and then it gets popular, and you sort of like prevents people from wanting to enjoy the same thing as you.
Gotcha.
So it's like with rock and roll bands, that happens a lot
Yeah.
with like
Yeah.
rock
Yes.
bands, like Tool back in the day. Oh,
Yes.
I love Tool before they became
Right.
mainstream.
Yeah, it is-
And then once they become mainstream, you just sort of poo-poo on everyone who essentially just liked the same, who now like the same stuff you liked, just 2 years later or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's nothing new. It's been happening since the dawn of time, but somebody came up with that name, gatekeeping, and then I feel like it's taken on like a different sort of aura, because I don't necessarily feel like there's anything particularly morally wrong with it. I think it's a human impulse, but people have made that label, therefore you're not allowed to have these feelings anymore. That you shouldn't go out of your way to like prevent people from enjoying the things they enjoy. But I think it's only human to have those feelings of having suffered your entire life getting beaten up because you read comic books, and then all of a sudden the whole world loves comic books, and you're just like, dude, I love these, and people used to beat me up for it, and now these people just get to celebrate it and get to make money, and I'm still not making money with my comics.
Fair point. I'm still waiting for I'm still waiting for Spartacus and the Sun Beneath the Sea to get popular so I can gatekeep that, but
Right.
that's never gonna happen.
And there's that balance, right? Because it's like I do want people to enjoy the things I enjoy, but then when everyone starts enjoying it, you're just kind of like,
It's funny because I was talking to my nephew. He's got like a lot of tattoos, and I don't have any. And he's like, "Well, what would you want?" And I was like, "Well, if you asked me 10 years ago, or like up until 5 years ago, my number one tattoo would have been the Mandalorian symbol that's on Boba Fett's, shoulder pauldron. And but now that that's just everywhere because of the TV show Mandalorian, I feel less inclined to want to have
Right,
it.
yeah.
But yet my entire life I wanted it. So I don't know if that's reverse gatekeeping or if it's still sort of gatekeeping, but I do see what you mean. It is human nature that like, okay, now that everybody loves it, and now I see Mandalorian stickers on people's cars and tattoos and stuff, I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I wouldn't be so unique with it now, therefore I don't really want it anymore.
Yeah, I think, we were talking about it a little bit in one of our threads. And I kind of feel like, I don't, the general nature of like, don't gatekeep, I think is valid, but I don't think it really calls into play a lot of the things that make us up as human beings. So a lot of that stuff is, it's tied into our culture. So
yeah.
And our culture is the things that make up who we are, right? So when somebody else that's not a part of your group like kind of takes that, I'll use the word appropriates that, you feel a little sense of loss and like, oh, I was the one that cultivated that thing, and now and there's a balance because it's all irrational, and like you actually don't own it, but you feel that sense of like, oh, I used to like that, and somehow it made me different and special, and I'm not special anymore. I think that's where it comes from,
Yeah,
so it's like kind of good and bad. And sometimes it's okay. Like sometimes you're not supposed to gatekeep, but then when it comes to like racial groups, then it's like bad. You can't gatekeep. Like if someone wants to go get dreads, and they're white, that I can't gatekeep that, right? But or you can gatekeep that, but then there's other things you can't, so
Yeah.
Unless you're Gary Oldman in True Romance, because he pulled that off like a mofo.
Like a mofo.
Or the lead singer for The Offspring, what's his name, Drexel or something?
No.
You're
good
in
talk.
genres. Like just and real quick though, then you have the other phenomenon. I think it's just why it really came up recently was the whole Kate Bush thing with Stranger Things.
Oh, okay.
In that case, I actually agree that people shouldn't like that quote unquote gatekeep over that. So
Yeah, because she's making a fortune now. Hallelujah.
yeah.
And so in regards to Battle of the Planets gatekeeping, it's like if you discovered it now and you're like, oh, this is really cool, and then someone's like, oh, well, I was into that back in the 70s. You know what I mean?
There's actually there's layers of complexity to it in this case, and a lot of it has to do with like otaku and people that watch anime, and they're like in sort of like the pure form for them is watching a series that is with the original Japanese and it's dubbed or as subtitled. So anything less than that is often kind of frowned upon. And then, obviously Battle of the Planets is the most edited version of all of the versions that have been out, because they took away a lot of the more adult themes. The original Science Ninja Team Gatchaman was darker, a lot more violence. It actually had a lot of there was like an environmental theme to it, and all of that was stripped away for the American version. It was just kind of toned down a lot for young kid audiences, who I was the target demographic for that as a kid. So, you know, kind of, but then in the time since, they made more and more versions, different versions. And so it's like, also, it's not called Battle of the Planets. It's Gatchaman, you know, there's that sort of layer of gatekeeping that goes on with that. So I kind of brought this one up and specifically wanted to do Battle of the Planets because I know some people will out there might be mad because no, that's Gatchaman, you know, and
okay,
you know,
I get it.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
but for you particularly, you have a fondness for Battle of the Planets, like this version, right?
Well, it's actually kind of funny. It's a little bit of a long journey for me, but it'll always have a place in my heart because that's where I discovered it. There's one element of it that actually has not been replicated, and that's the opening theme music. And that was actually composed by Hoyt Curtin, who did like the Flintstones, Top Cat, the Jetsons, Johnny Quest, Smurfs, and he did the theme to Super Friends, the original Super Friends cartoon. If you actually go back and listen to Super Friends cartoon, and then listen to the Battle of the Planets cartoon, they're like really similar. They're like almost
They
the
are.
same.
I picked that up almost immediately when I heard it.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen this show before, and I was like, oh, that sounds really familiar.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I actually, in the journey of this show, like I watched it as a kid, loved it, especially in the 70s and early 80s. Obviously, it wasn't really easy to find anime shows unless, I mean, they all just came on TV and you were just kind of like, you know, it's up to the licensing, right? And it wasn't until like the mid to late 90s when a lot of that stuff started coming over en masse. And then there was an original video OVA that was made of Gatchaman. It was a three episode series. I think each one was about an hour or so. And it's sort of like remade the original. Kind of summed up the entire series in 3 parts for like kind of like 3 movies. And that's when I sort of like reintroduced to Gatchaman again, because I was able to like sit down and watch it over and over. And then that was actually my first exposure to the original concept. So I knew the characters with different names. And then when I got to Gatchaman 94, I was able to like discover their real names, like see what there were actually storylines that were taking place. And then in 2005, ADV Films released the original Gatchaman cartoon that was redubbed really brilliantly, because they redubbed it in a style that was reminiscent of the 70s. So it wasn't kind of like when they did redid the special effects for Star Trek, the original series. They made it so that it looked like it still could have like fit into the 60s. That's what they did here with the voices. So like it was just amazingly well done. There's a like kind of like quote unquote cheesy feeling to it, but it feels like perfect time and place. But that is the most faithful, true to the original series. So I actually watched those like 105 episodes. That was back when you could only get videos. You had to mail in videos from Netflix. So that's how I watched them all. Yeah, and that's when I really like I got to actually have the actual Gatchaman experience. But yeah, I have like the soundtracks, and I have figures, and
Cool.
Yeah, it is a show very near and dear to my heart, and watching, you know, it's actually one of the first Sentai shows. So like
Not hentai.
yeah,
Not hentai.
definitely not hentai.
Cool.
Although I have seen hentai based on it for sure.
I'm sure you have.
But yeah, so like Sentai shows are like Power Rangers basically. So there's usually five people, different color schemes. They have different
Voltron
different
Sentai?
vehicles. Yeah, Voltron Sentai, different vehicles that kind of join up into one. Gatchaman was one of the first like that. It's obviously not quite like Power Rangers and those other shows, but you can see like the nuts and bolts of how it evolved down the road.
Cool.
Yeah. So they didn't have a giant robot, but they often fought giant robots and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, I noticed that like right away. It's sort of connections to Voltron, and one of the things I actually liked about this was that the Gatchaman themselves, the actual people, did more of the action themselves than in Voltron, where the action never really worked out, and then they have to get into their lions,
Right.
and then you knew the inevitable, like they wouldn't be able to stop the creature until they'd formed Voltron. It was very systematic, and even as a kid, it kind of created a disassociation from the characters for me because they're not actually doing anything. Here, I actually like the fact that they themselves were the action centered around them. You know.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because I watched Battle of the Planets as a kid, and then I watched some much later, and then I haven't watched Battle of the Planets since maybe the early '90s, maybe if that, and since I've watched the Gatchaman 94 OVA and then the original Gatchaman series. So going back and watching these episodes that I watched the other day was so fascinating to watch how much they edited it to get basically that character 7 Zark 7, who I didn't get to go over the voice actors yet, but that voice that was done by Alan Young, who was in the Alan Young show. He was Wilbur in Mr. Ed, and he also
Wilbur.
Yeah.
By the way, I used to love Mr. Ed. Used to watch that on Nick at Night with Hogan's Heroes. Two of my favorite shows from back in the day.
Yeah, totally. Backtrack to Mr. Ed. That's pretty wild that they had that show on for that long. It's just like a guy at his talking horse, and you really couldn't do that show like today. Like,
Nope.
Not that the subject matter is risque or anything, but it's just a talking horse. It's crazy.
It's probably unhealthy for the horse because of the amount of peanut butter that he had to eat to get his mouth to move.
Talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he also played this might not mean anything to anybody else in the world, but the movie The Time Machine, the 60s version by George Paul, is one of my all-time favorite movies.
With Rod Taylor?
Yeah, with Rod Taylor. And he plays the Philbys. They're the traveler's friend in the past, and also a version of the traveler in the 60s, I think.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, anyways, he voiced a character called 7 Zark 7, who was basically like a cross between R2D2 and C3PO. Yeah. And he was made to kind of be a bumper between the scenes that were edited out. So you can kind of tell when you watch it now, because he does a lot of exposition. He does a lot of like telling you what Gatchaman or the G-Force is. They're going off into space now. They're fighting these. So he gives a lot of commentary over the screen. And all of that was done just so that they could cut out all of the scenes that were deemed too violent for kids.
I mean, he has one of the best lines in the first episode where he's like, I pay special attention to the princess. I don't know why.
Dude, that was super creepy.
Yes.
There's
and funny.
Yeah,
I too pay special attention to the princess, but I know why.
There's another voice character, the computer named Susan is voiced by a woman.
Super sexual
Yeah,
computer.
super sexual.
Yes.
Like, hello. Yeah, it's so funny. Again, it's like Americans. I don't know. I guess it's kind of the reverse than it is now, because they kind of tone down the violence, and Americans are like, now we're like super violent. But like, if you put anything sexual on TV, it's like, oh, we gotta edit that. It was like a little bit reversed here. So they cut stuff for kids, but then they had like super sexual computer voice. And the robot that like he goes through the pains of telling you he doesn't sleep or he doesn't eat, but then he's like, I don't know why, I have a crush on this chick.
whose panties we keep staring at the entire time.
Yeah. So so real quick, the voice, the characters, the leader of the team is named Luke. He's voiced by the legend Casey, the man Kasem. Top 40, was it top 40? Casey Kasem's top 40. He voiced Robin on Super Friends.
Noon.
Yeah,
I have to go on at noon. Have you ever heard the outtake of him? Where he's like,
no.
You give me a goddamn dog dying, and you want you want me to go into a Kajagoogoo record or something like that. You know?
That's funny.
And then he's like, join me at midnight or noon, and he's like, noon. Anyways, sorry.
I do love me some Casey
Kasem.
Kasem.
I know, dude. I used to listen to the top 40. I used to love it when he would like get to the times when he would like do the dedication, and his voice would go down really low, and I was going through a tough time, and blah 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 blah, and I'm gonna dedicate this to you. Too shy to shy. That's why do I. Anyways, he in the Japanese version, that character was Ken the Eagle. Then the other character was named Mark, voiced by Ronnie Shell, who was mostly known for the first few seasons of Gomer Pyle. He was Gomer Pyle's best friend. He was named Joe the Condor in the Japanese version. Then there's Princess, who is voiced by Janet Waldo. She was in Shazam. She's played Josie from Josie and the Pussycats, Penelope Pitstop, and she was played Cersei on an episode of Thundar the Barbarian, which we all know and love.
Nice.
And that was originally, she was the character June the Swan in the Japanese version. Then there's really weird, I don't know why they voiced him this way, but C.O.P.S is the boy. Again,
the genetically modified or engineered kid.
Yeah, genetically modified. It was a strange choice. No one really knows why they chose to voice him that way, but it's actually really iconic. I remember like me and my friends running around imitating him, and one of my good friends today, we kind of connected over that show, and he started just like whenever he got really drunk, instead of speaking Huttese like I did, he would do like C.O.P voice.
Nice.
That's awesome.
I approve of that.
Yeah. And in the Japanese version, that he was Jinpai the Swallow, and then lastly was the big guy Tiny, who was voiced by Alan Dinehart, who didn't have like any iconic characters he voiced, but he was on a lot of, to me, iconic shows. So he was on Studio 57, Plastic Man, Thundar, Heathcliff, Goldie Gold, and Action Jack, because that's a show I might do at some point here. The Mork and Mindy, Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days cartoon, Spidey and His Amazing Friends, Saturday Starcade, and Alvin and the Chipmunks. So, and
nice.
he was Ryu the Owl on the Japanese version. And then also Key Luke, Japanese actor, did the voice of Zoltar. So yeah, that
Key Luke was from Kung Fu, I think.
Yeah. And you know, there's actually another piece that is really interesting. The character of Zoltar in the American version is so in the Japanese version, Berg Katse is actually that same character, right? But they're kind of transgender, so sometimes appears as a man and sometimes appears as a woman.
Cool.
And obviously that's not going to fly the American version. So I think what they did was the scenes that they were man, it would appear Zoltar, but then they split into the sister, Mala Latraz, which if you spell Latraz backwards, it's Zoltar.
Zoltar, yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I can see why 1978 America was like, no, we can't handle that.
Dude,
we can barely handle transgender in 2022.
Yeah, I was about to say 2022 America can't handle transgender. That's another thing from like Robotech. That was another one. Yellow Dancer. I don't know if you remember that character, but it was like cross-dressing transgender.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just like, here I am. And I remember being a kid, like, there they are. And I didn't freak out. And I just moved on with my life. Thought that was one of the coolest characters. But if that came on today, everyone would be like, why are you so woke? You know?
Oh, if that came on today, it'd break the internet.
Yeah, it would. It really would.
And people have a problem with that, but they didn't have a problem with that Power Lord time, the toy line Power Lords. You remember Adam Power?
Yeah.
He had like this creepy blue guy in the back of him.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? That's disgusting. You know, it's like this weird co-joined blue thing, and people are like totally fine with that, but can't have transgender. What the fuck?
Yeah.
I mean, like by the way, everything you just said about that toy line was how I felt. I didn't want to play with those toys because they looked disgusting to me.
Disgusting. So weird. And then
really
they,
weird.
Four Horsemen woke up and they made two different figures.
Yeah.
They made but anyways, sorry.
Yeah, but that is it. Like, even there's so many elements of Gatchaman. I don't know that they started a lot of this stuff because I can, like, when you watch like Ultraman, he raises his beta capsule, turns into Ultraman, and there's other stuff in the past, but especially when we get to Bionic 6, there's a lot of stuff I was watching in Bionic 6 that definitely were from Gatchaman. And there's some other elements, Centurions, other stuff that I remember. I was like, oh, yeah. And Galaxy Rangers is another one. There's like a lot of concepts that they use here in Gatchaman.
That actually makes sense. Centurions would be a Scion or Saiyan, Super Saiyan.
Super Sentai, yeah.
Yeah, Sentai. It would be a Sentai show, wouldn't it? Because they transmorphify and everything like that.
Yeah,
okay, cool.
yeah.
I didn't even think
Power
about that. Good
extreme.
point.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's like it was, this is a really weird one because it's actually obviously has a really deep, rich history. Probably a lot more well known in Japan as an iconic cornerstone than it is here. Obviously, people know it, but it's so convoluted and it's kind of like if you walked up to a random person, they would never really have heard of it, or if I said G-Force, they might, is that the one with the bird people? Like, they wouldn't really know.
If you said the name, I guarantee that. But if you showed them a picture of it, I guarantee a high percentage would actually recognize it.
Yeah.
I never watched this show back in the day, mainly because I think I was aware of how convoluted the behind the scenes was, and I just wasn't sure which version to watch. And then I was just like, well, I'll just go watch something else. But you can't go to comic book conventions in the 90s or swim in the anime/cartoon world at all in the 90s moving forward without coming across Battle of the Planets, aka G-Force, aka Gatchaman. Even before, I don't think it was IDW. I forgot which company put it out, but some company put out a comic book based on this, and they kind of did. They try to combine all the mythos and the lore to create one sort of standalone thing. And all I remember is that Alex Ross painted.
Yeah,
the
I was
covers.
about to say Alex Ross. Yeah.
So
it was like
good.
he did the cover. He also did the covers for the DVD, the Blu-ray
Okay.
sets as well.
So cool.
Yeah.
I know he was a big fan of the show. But growing up, I've always been aware of it. I would say me personally, I've always known it more as G-Force.
Yeah.
Or maybe even Gatchaman, whereas Battle of the Planets was not sort of on my radar as a name. And it wasn't until probably late 90s, early 2000s that I realized that Battle of the Planets was the same thing.
Right.
Because I'd heard of it before. And so, yeah, there's the behind the scenes on this is very convoluted, and there's quite a few YouTube videos out there that you could track down and watch that actually explains the entire history of it, and it is convoluted. But we're just focusing on the Battle of the Planet show because that's what we watched. And I watched the first episode that Diallo sent over, and honestly, I thought it was a hoot. I thought the animation was outstanding. I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. I always loved the designs of these characters. Even back in the day, I've always like, oh yeah, they're really cool looking. I was like, I'm not gonna, watch it, but those are cool looking characters, and I still think they hold up. Like as far as costume design goes, I think they hold up really well, especially Princess. I think she holds up great.
Of course.
But I thought, the episodes that we watched, I thought the action was fun. I thought them kind of combining all of their vehicles, they don't really combine them, they kind of like scoop them up.
Yeah.
Was like out of the 22 minutes, it was like 8 minutes of the show was that. And I was
Right.
like, you guys are real padding the time here, aren't you? But it was fun. It was fun from beginning to end. I liked the villains that they fought, but they felt more of like a down-to-earth terrorist organization, not a intergalactic terrorist organization. And knowing that the original show took place on the planet versus this one being called Battle of the Planets, so like, well, we have to like make quote unquote planets in it when they didn't really have any. That makes a lot more sense to me. I would probably prefer to go back and watch that DVD you were talking about with the new dubbed version and just watch it in its correct version,
Yeah.
because I do, even without knowing it, you got the sense that the episodes are piecemealed together. And I actually liked Zork 7, whatever his name was. Like, I was fine with it. I thought, hey, he's funny, he's enjoyable, and I, like Zach pointed out, I liked his little line. I'm like, okay, we're going with little sleeves right here. I can get on board with that. But it's weird because, like, would I want to watch Battle of the Planets again? Probably not. But I want to watch Gatchaman. It's just the idea that we're getting a lesser than version, it just makes me not want to watch it, because knowing that so much is left on the cutting room floor. Now, granted, I guarantee you there's a shit ton of people out there that love Battle of the Planets and would pick that, but probably because of nostalgic reasons, because it hits their nostalgic core. But as a new person, I'd probably want to go back and watch the actual correct version of it. But this was a nice way to sort of wet my palate and sort of get me accustomed to the characters and everything.
Yeah, I'm echoing everything you guys have said already, feeling-wise about it. I've never seen this show. I've been familiar with it since I was a kid. Would go to Japanese markets and see, like, little candies that had like stickers of the characters in them or something like that, and I always thought they looked really cool. I remember seeing model kits in the 90s and wanting them, not even knowing what it was, but just wanted it because I thought it was super cool. And I enjoyed the show. I didn't think it was that, like, I'm watching it going, not knowing the history that Diallo just described, I went into it with like total cold feet and fresh feet, I guess, and enjoyed it. Interestingly enough, Bodhi watched it all three with me, and he liked Jason the most out of all the characters. He thought he was like the coolest, and like, well, he's kind of the bad boy. He's like, yeah, that's why I like him.
Yeah, he's the.
Not gonna lie, I like Jason too. I thought he was cool, man.
He was the coolest one. He doesn't make it in the Japanese version.
Oh,
kind of like his equivalent in Voltron, who doesn't make it past the first. The first
makes
episode.
sense.
Yeah.
I noticed that Luke's bracelet reminded me of Snake Plissken's bracelet in Escape from New York, the little tracking device thing. Before it like transforms into kind of the signal sent out, it almost looks the identical in a way. I know that was like an eagle on Pliskin's wrist, but this one was like less adorned with kind of articulation, but still was reminded me of that. I loved having I thought that was a nice fix to have the robot narrate the scenes. And actually, I found it like kind of breaking the fourth wall and enjoyable and different. So overall, I like the show. I like the kind of kaiju looking monster in the beginning.
Yeah.
And the whole time watching this, I'm like, our buddy Robert Ortiz, Patreon subscriber and friend of the show. I'm sure he's seen this show. He's probably seen every single episode. Scott Zillner, mutual friend, probably owns every single piece of memorabilia from this show.
Yeah,
so
this is well within Scott's wheelhouse, I'm sure.
Yeah, I remember being at a Comic-Con not that long ago, and a full cosplay of all the characters, and it was how impressive. I had never seen the show up until that point, but still was impressed with the how articulated the cosplay costumes were. They were so fantastic. So I know the show has a lot of history. And it's cool to finally see it. And now I can go, I know Gatchaman. It's the same as Pokemon and
it's exactly the same. Zach, when you made me think of this just when you were talking about it. I actually wrote this note down, but I forgot to mention it. The Seven Zark 7. Remember those scenes? I actually can't remember if they have him in this episode, but they have his little dog, the robot dog.
Okay.
Forget the name now.
It's like Fido 1 Fido or something.
Yeah,
it was the same sort of thing. Yeah.
Hold on just one sec. There's an airplane flying by. I don't know if you can hear it.
Can't hear it.
Or a helicopter.
It's okay. Zach has him fly overhead too. I just leave him in. It's all good.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. So,
fuck you, Corey.
So the dog character, actually, the robot dog character, Rover 1.
Rover 1. Yeah, there you go.
The dog character actually, as I was watching it this time, I was like, that really reminds me of K9 from Doctor Who. And then I looked it up, and actually K9 debuted a year before this came out. So K9 debuted in 1977, and this came out in 1978. So I was like,
they got you, man.
They got you. Yeah, so I caught that little connection. So they definitely were trying to pull the kids in. I mean, there were so many allusions to Star Wars. The name
Luke. Yeah, come on, Luke.
Yeah, Luke, Princess. I mean, even as a little kid, I knew what they were doing.
Well, fun fact.
Star Wars
fun fact: Han Solo's real name is Mark Solo. So,
yeah. My question was though, based on the episodes that we watched, when they turned into fiery phoenix form, Seven Zark 7 said they can't turn back for 24 hours. So are they stuck in that mode for is that a part of the storyline? Like once they use that phoenix thing, they can't turn back or something?
No, absolutely not. I can't remember exactly what, like, if there were any rules placed on the Japanese version, but they would. It was always like a last resort. It's not like Voltron where they used it every episode, but they used it semi-frequently. And just when it was over, it reverted back to the regular Phoenix ship. And when they were in the fire mode, you could see them like all the stress and the ship being torn apart kind of stuff. But yeah, it wasn't like. I don't know if there was like a time limit placed on in the Japanese one, but they never it wasn't like a thing that they called on often. So yeah.
Okay. My only final takeaway is that that show needed a good brand manager here in the U.S. and I think the most of its faults lie in its brand mismanagement at this point. Like, what is the name of it? Like everyone has all these different ideas of what the name is, what it's about. I put all of that fault on brand management.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like back in 1972, like they just weren't on licensing like they are now. We encounter that in almost every live action show we do when it just comes to the music, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just like a mishmash of who had the rights, and this person got the rights, and then it was popular. So I think who did the Saban Entertainment did Galaxy Riders, I think it was. Oh no, Eagle Riders did another version, but they used footage from like Gatchaman 2 and Gatchaman Fighter, which were the sequels, but they had different mecha in them, so they were able to like.
Okay.
And it was that. So it was just back when the first deal was done, the rights were all over the place. But actually, they all reverted back to Tatsunoko the early 2010s, I think. So they have all of the rights now, which is why it's actually going to be really hard to find the Gatchaman Blu-ray. But
that also means we might get a new one as well. Though,
at some point. And there's probably like a Japanese version out there as well. And then there's a live action movie that came out in 2013, Japanese. I haven't seen it. It's really hard to track down. But I heard it's.
Is it called Crappy Man?
I heard it sucks. So.
Well,
does it star Jared Leto? Jared Leto's in it.
Yeah, and, he plays all 5 characters actually.
He does.
Even Princess.
Yeah. James Franco shows up and he's like, "Hey, where's all the ladies at?" And people are like, "Nope."
Nope. Well, when you picked this one, I knew it was going to take us a while to get through the backstory and everything around it. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's still worth checking out, and the animation still holds up well. And I think we can all agree that probably watching the original version would be the ideal way to go at this point.
Amen.
No doubt.
Amen to that.
Hey everybody, Corey here. I just want to let you know that we'll be right back after these short messages.
Imagine being one of the last people on Earth, being trapped alone with something not human, something always watching, something always waiting. What would you do? Where would you run? Where would you hide if you were haunted for 7 winters alone?
Podcasting After Dark presents 7 Winters Alone, a dystopian haunted house story by David Irons.
Available now in paperback and ebook.
And now, back to the show. So, Zach, are you ready to talk about Bionic Six?
Bionic Six.
Oh my
Sure.
God, that dude! I've been singing that all day long. It's a great song and a great way to kick off an amazing cartoon.
How can you not? I mean, we'll get to the guys who came up with the theme song, but yeah, Bionic Six is a believe it or not, fairly lesser known television cartoon from 1987. It was produced by Universal, and I think it was actually featured originally on the USA Network, but it was syndicated as well. Ran for 65 episodes. They say it ran for 2 seasons, but I think it's really 1, if you think about it. 1 year, really, of shows. I was kind of blown away when I did a little bit of research on this show to find out that it was supposed to be kind of the direct result of the $6 million man and $6 million woman getting married, having a family, and this is their family. I didn't know that until like today. But the show is about, these 6 characters who all have abilities. The 6 characters, there's a mother, there's a father, and then there's 4 siblings. The father is Jack, and the mother is Helen. They've got a multi-racial family: Bungie, JD, Eric, and Meg, and Fluffy, their robot. And so I would say, I think we were joking offline before we recorded that the previous episode that we did was my pick was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, and definitely not a 2022 woke show. This is definitely a 2022 woke show. Just as far as the depth of the characters and the diversity and the awareness. The first episode that I had everybody watch is called Valley of Shadows, and it concerns JD, who's the African-American kid in the group, kind of on his story arc as they're searching for this mystical land of Arcadia in Africa. And he's kind of the centerpiece of this episode. It's a really beautiful episode, actually. I think it's really well done. More on that in a second. But they battle, the Bionic Six battle this character, Dr. Scarab, and his evil minions, some of which are called Mechanic. That's a stretch. And Glove. That's a stretch, too. Later episodes, they're joined by Madam O and Chopper and Clunk. Yeah, not a lot of depth there. But nevertheless, this show boasts a pretty amazing kind of behind the scenes people. The creator is Ron Friedman. Ron Friedman was a writer for Transformers and G.I. Joe, among other things. He also worked on the Marvel Action Hour and Iron Man and Fantastic Four, and he wrote Transformers the movie. The man is a god, in my opinion, because I think Transformers the movie is one of the best 80s animated movies of all time. And as far as a faithful adaptation of a TV show, it's probably one of the best as far as not, because it doesn't parody. You know, when people talk about faithful adaptations of shows, sometimes they delve into the parody land, like the Brady Bunch, right? The Brady Bunch movie's great. It really, I think it is, but it's total parody of the show. Or Beverly Hillbillies is a parody. But Transformers the movie is such a legitimate, kick-ass, faithful continuation of the story. And, you know, if you think about it, like finale, what should have been the finale of the story. But Ron Friedman is the creator of Bionic Six. The voice cast for this show is phenomenal. I'm going to throw out a few names and you're going to go, oh yeah, I know that guy. Neil Ross, Alan Oppenheimer, Frank Welker, right there. Those are three names that are synonymous that you've heard on the show before. If you don't know who they are, then you're listening to the wrong show. Go back and listen to our earlier episodes because we brought up all three of them. And the last one is Brian Tochi. Brian Tochi, you know, I think a lot of people will remember him from the Revenge of the Nerds movies as Toshiro Takahashi, or Takashi, sorry, and the Police Academy films, and also Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He was the voice of Leonardo in the first three, and in my opinion, the best voice out of all of them. But the guy is a phenomenal voice actor as well, and he's on this too. This show, it's people often say like, why isn't this show more well known? You know, the animation is ridiculously good. It's on par with, Diallo mentioned it earlier, Centurions and Galaxy Rangers, like that kind of level of animation. And I don't know why people didn't tune into it as often as they probably should have. The toy line was different because it boasted as being like all metal and die cast with, like, they had glow-in-the-dark plastic pieces on their body that kind of shone through. Yeah, the translucent pieces. I always liked the toys for these. I thought they were really cool looking with those. I am a sucker for translucent toys, plastic pieces. I don't know why. Same.
Too. Like the old Tron toys, the original Tron toys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember Crystar, the Crystal Warrior?
Crystar from Remco was a badass toy line. They should have had a cartoon for that. They had a comic book, I know.
Yeah.
But
Marvel,
Crystar was great. But yeah, the Bionic Six figures were really, really cool looking. They were produced by LJN. And there's kind of a history. LJN kind of went down the tubes because of Entertech. Entertech came out, and kids, the toy line was great, but unfortunately, kids were getting killed by cops because the guns were too authentic looking, the water guns that they put out. We've talked about it before. I think we talked about it in our Obscure toy episode,
We
Corey.
we
you and
did,
I.
buddy. Yeah, I had a few Intertech guns growing up. I had like the M16. I had like an Uzi, and
I of course had the Jack Burton one from Big Trouble in Little China.
of course. And I hated when I was a kid. I hated when they went from black to the crazy colors. But
Yeah.
now I am so ravenously nostalgic for those crazy Intertech colors that would be the only version I'd want now. You know. But yes,
Yeah, I would-
but Intertech almost sank LJN.
It really did, and the toy line tanked, unfortunately. It was really cool, though. They had, like... So, besides the fact that they had a bunch of vehicles and a playset that looked great, and they go for a lot of money on eBay now, by the way. The villains, oftentimes in a new cartoon, the villain line would come out, and they'd only release, like, maybe 2 or 3 of the villains, right? And then, like, 6 of the heroes. This released 6 villains and 7 heroes, including Fluffy, the big mechanical robot in the family. And what I also love about it is they had female characters in the toy line, and that was kind of surprising for the mid to late 80s. They didn't do that all that often. I think G.I. Joe, as far as I know, well, G.I. Joe and He-Man, I think, were one of the few toy lines that included the female characters from the show as well. Because oftentimes you watch the cartoon, and these toys the cartoon was all about selling toys, right? If they're not going to release the female characters, like they didn't do that for Mask, they didn't do that for C.O.P.S, which you're going to talk about in a little bit. They didn't do that for a lot of toy lines. They didn't release the female characters. You're like, but she's an integral part of the story. You're like, why don't you do that? Well, they did that for this because it was a family, right? Really quickly, the Bionic Six had, besides their kind of normal names, they had kind of cheesy nicknames.
Like Sport One and Karate One.
You were naming their names, and I'm like, who are these people? I know them all by their superhero names or whatever.
Yeah,
I
so
know Karate One and
Yeah.
Sport One.
yeah, sorry, yeah. So obviously,
Cheesy. What are you talking about?
well, or Rad nowadays, I guess you should say. Yeah, Neil Ross, who's the voice of Shipwreck, he was the voice of Fluffy. Brian Tochi was Bunjiro, but also known as Karate One. Frank Welker was Glove. He was also Mechanic too. Remind me, Corey, to bring up the parallels between some of the villains in Bionic Six and C.O.P.S. Samantha Paris played Rock One, aka Meg Bennett. Jack Bennett is the main
Mega,
hero.
wow.
She was Roxy in Jam, Truly
Oh, okay.
Outrageous.
Nice.
Ooh, Jam.
Truly outrageous, truly, truly, truly outrageous. Whoa, Jim!
Carol
I love
Bilger.
that song, by the way. Love that song. One of my favorite '80s theme songs was the Gem.
The music's contagious, right?
It is, yes.
It's so good.
It's
so
outrageous.
good. If
It's
we ever can
outrageous.
if we can ever get Fern on this show, we should just cover Jem because he knows Jem so well.
I'd be 100% down with that.
100 and thousands.
Carol Bilger plays Mother Helen, aka Mother One, and I'm like, oh, Mother One. So where's going to be Mother Two and Mother Three, and is there going to be a Mother Four? Maybe there is, depending on how many marriages Jack has. Norman Bernard played JD, aka IQ. I'm wondering if they gave him IQ instead of like Smart One.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe because that could be racist because he's African American, and who knows. He's the Smart One. That would have been totally racist. But Karate One is not racist.
Not racist.
Okay, sure. And then John Stevenson plays Jack Bennett, a.k.a. Bionic One. He played Thundercracker on the Transformers, and he Colossus in Spider-Man and Mr. Arable and Charlotte's Web. Great voice actor. Great voice actor. He played Professor X on Pride of the X-Men.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
TV movie. So anyways, I don't want to talk too much about Bionic Six outside of that. I just want to mention
before you leave the people, I noticed that Jennifer Darling, who played Madam O, she was actually on the Bionic Woman as Peggy Callahan.
That's awesome.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome. This show, it's I gave the guys a link to the Daily Motion episodes. You can find some of the later episodes on YouTube. I haven't seen every single episode of these, but I know one of the last episodes is they go into this alternate kind of cartoon universe where they see cartoon versions of themselves. It sounds phenomenal. I want to watch it now because it sounds kick-ass. So anyways, I think Bionic Six is great. I was hesitant to bring it to the show because I really wanted to do another one, which we will get to down the road. But I'm glad I did because I had a lot of fun with it. What did you guys do with it?
This was a show that I, at some point, might have done myself. So I have great love for this. It's actually a show when I hear people say that it's like super obscure, to me, it does not compute, although I think it is obscure.
I agree.
I actually think it is obscure, but it doesn't compute because I watched it all the time. I remember when it was on, I watched it where I lived. It came on, I think it was on in the mornings on TV 44, KBHK.
It sure was.
Cable
Daddy.
12.
Yep, syndicated.
Yeah, and I used to
baby.
watch it in the mornings, and and we'd go to school, talk about it, whatever. Yeah, it just it's a show that it has all these again with Gatchaman, it just has all these elements that I always seem to be drawn into, like the super team, kind of hidden powers. You transform into your superhero form. I liked the aspect of the multiracial family.
Same.
And I it's so woke. I keep coming back to that because that whole thing is ridiculous.
It's hilarious, but goddamn, it's true, right? You could show this now, and people would be like, "Oh, huh, yeah."
It's like a reflex people have now, but it's like this has always been around. All this stuff's always been around. And it's like in this category where I watched it religiously all the time as much as I could. Years later, I found it on right when internet was kind of taking off. I was able to find it on some obscure sites that were streaming TV cartoons, and I would watch it there. But there's one episode in particular that I remember well. And it is an episode where there's a concert with this band called the Bandroids. And they sing this rock song. Bandroids, we know what to do. We are here to play our songs for you. And they had
That's awesome.
It was it was one of those
Makes
shows.
Cold Slither look terrible.
Yeah, right? It was one of those shows that, I guess all of those shows in the era, the story could, went all over the place.
Yeah.
But that was just an example. I think Galaxy Rangers had that concert, pseudo reality concert
I'm sure they
too.
did. That's such a we gotta have a concert episode.
Yeah, in that era. But one of the things about that concept or family that I always felt was intriguing was I always wanted to know why, how did they get their powers? What was the deal? Why are they a family together? The voiceover that they give at the beginning kind of gives you a super, super, super high level, brought together by fate. But what happened? I want to know how this couple adopted these kids. I'm assuming they're all adopted. I just wanted to know that. I wanted to know the mechanism of how their bionics worked, what caused them. And I actually do feel like there was an episode where they kind of talked about that at some point. But
they did, yeah.
But I wanted basically if you were to do it again, or if I got hired tomorrow to do the comic book, I would spend a lot of time on their origin story, basically, because I was always really into that. I wanted to know how it worked, why it worked, outside of one kid liking sports, so he's sport one, the Asian kid's karate.
Yeah, sport one. Yeah, and before Corey chimes in, I just want to bring up, you brought up a really good point of something that I may have said before that I feel like the other two shows did well, where they kind of gave the backstory in the first episode, but this one did not. You got to wait till future episodes to find out kind of backstories of the characters. I know it's not always kind of staged out the way it's supposed to be, and like in the case of Spiral Zone, their pilot was like episode 8 or something like that. But come on, man, like, you know, if you did this today, you'd have to have that pilot episode to just kind of nail in where we're going with these characters, and then the second episode you can have your rock concert, or, you know, in the case of the first episode, you're chasing a Fountain of Youth kind of amulet. You know, yeah, it's interesting.
And even the dialogue in the first episode implied that they had already crossed paths with the villain and everything. And to your point, I would also add Citizen Ghost from The Real Ghostbusters, which was like halfway through season 1, but that episode told the backstory of like how they met Slimer and the events that happened immediately after the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and how they had to get their new costumes and everything. And it's still my favorite episode of The Real Ghostbusters, but it's the same. It should have been the very first one, but it wasn't.
Yeah, and kind of going along with the lines of the way the season worked with Bionic Six, I'm now going to mention Sport One and who played him.
Steve Sanders from 90210.
Yeah, right. So Sport One, aka Eric, is also he's played by the actor Hal Rail. Hal Rail actually has a very extensive voiceover career. He played Shrapnel in the Transformers the movie, Snarl, one of the Dinobots, right, in the Transformers cartoon, Arzon in Visionaries, another phenomenal cartoon in my opinion,
which we
and
discussed.
the Predator, the voice of the Predator in Predator 2.
Oh,
Hey.
yeah.
So I had to throw that in there before you jump. Sorry, Corey, I didn't want to delay your thoughts anymore. So
No,
please,
no
Corey,
worries.
unload on us, if you will.
Yeah, but Bionic Six, just like Battle of the Planets, aka G-Force, was a show that I was aware of. But Bionic Six, I don't think I could find it. I feel like, and I don't know for 100% sure, but I feel like it was on either too early for me to watch, or it was like a Sunday one or something, but I remember seeing it, but never able to actually catch it. So it was fun to actually watch Battle of the Planets and this for the first time, to both being shows that I knew existed but have never seen. This one, spoiler alert, was actually my favorite of all three of them. Zach, going to what you were saying, I am glad you went with this one ultimately, because I thought it was great. I loved the vibe of it. I loved the whole family aspect of it. I don't need a backstory as to why they're a family. You tell me that you all are a family, then you're a family. That's it. I'm okay with that. You know what I mean?
We're a family.
They
We're
fight
family.
for them. They fight for me.
There you go. And like Zach just said, we're a family, you know. I don't think you need to explain it, you know. So what I really loved about it, weirdly, I liked the designs. I liked their costumes.
Oh, hell yeah.
I liked how they felt like a team.
So good.
And I always kind of like yellow and black as a sort of a main color scheme. I dig that, but I also dig how they also, like, their costumes sort of altered a little bit for what they were and all that kind of stuff. So you could immediately tell who was who. But I liked how they still stayed together thematically. And I mean, it's a cartoon. You gotta like the visuals, you know, as at a first glance. The animation, the opening was fantastic. The music, fan-fucking-tastic. Zach, you didn't say who the composer was.
No, I was waiting for you. I was waiting for one of you guys to bring it up.
So I'll just say, he did a lot of stuff. But the reason I'm tapping my toes and snapping my fingers, he's also the guy that created the Gummy Bears theme song, which after Jim and the Hologram, so Gummy Bears, Jim and the Holograms, and Mask are probably my three favorite theme songs from the 80s. And he did the Gummy Bears. So the theme for this was great. The opening animation was great, but I was pleased to find out that the in-show animation was just as good as the rest of the intro. It was kind of like the Mighty Orbots that Diallo brought about a year ago for us to discuss. And that show, we love the fact that the in-show animation was as good as the intro animation. And I think it's because at this point we're so used to shows like Thundercats, where the intro animation is stellar, it's a 10, but then the in-show animation's like, come on guys, Thundercats is like a 6. It's really bad.
Yeah, wait till we get the tiger sharks.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I was happy that the animation was good in Bionic 6. Loved their powers. I love that they're essentially robots. At least if you check out, Leader 1 or Papa 1, he's all robot inside.
Yeah, and he looks badass.
Leader
underneath
1.
that skin.
Yeah,
Rip that skin off, baby.
Diallo got that reference. But so my question. So going into this show, and as a kid, never knew. I was like, is this at all related to Bionic Woman and $6 Million Man? I never understood if it was. Then everything tells us that it is, and that it was incepted to be that. But then why is her name Helen, and her name and his name, they're both different than the original shows?
Because they didn't have the rights.
Okay, so then it's not really the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman then, right? Like,
I mean,
it's
I
not.
never, I was a big fan of both of those shows. Like, $6 Million Man was actually one of my first TV loves, and big fan of Bionic Woman. And watching Bionic 6, it actually never crossed my mind that it was supposed to be those two. But I get how if you were to create a show called Bionic 6, you would sort of use that idea, that template, just like, The Boys uses Justice League or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But
it's a springboard. It's almost like a what if.
Yeah. But
Okay.
I never. I mean, and I could be wrong, but I've never interpreted as being like that's supposed to be, Steve Austin and Jamie Summers if they had kids. Besides, they had a dog on the original, and that's all they need is a dog. Max.
Yes.
Max,
And-
the bionic dog.
And I don't think that it has to be at all connected for there to be any kind of enjoyment, because I think this is a standalone thing, and I'm fine with that. It's just I just found that in my brain to be a little bit convoluted.
Yeah, it was a creative choice ultimately, and it makes me wonder, because because those two shows were geared. It was in the evening, even though kids watched it, it was still more of a evening show for families, I guess, and maybe more for adults. And maybe that they wanted to separate it a little bit and make this more just overall kid friendly.
It was also Bionic 6 was like a decade after
Yes.
both those shows. Also,
So
they
they didn't feel the need to connect it, because it's like, what's the point? But I get that it was like maybe incepted as that idea.
Easily. I mean, Bionic 6,
Yeah.
$6 Million Man, Bionic
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I don't know that there were any direct ties to the original shows.
Okay.
And I do want to point out that Thomas Chase and Steve Rucker were the composers behind the theme song. I just really quickly want to list off some of the shows that they did besides the Gummy Bears
The
that you brought up.
classics.
Real Ghostbusters,
Yeah.
Alvin and the Chipmunks, Freddy's Nightmares. What else? We're looking at Johnny Quest, Captain Planet. I mean, that alone is a pretty phenomenal resume. But then you go into Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Laboratory and the Scooby-Doo in 2005 and the Batman in 2005. You're getting into overall, it's been amazing. Their resume is phenomenal.
And speaking of Captain Planet, this does feel like a direct precursor to Captain Planet.
Totally.
With the
Yep.
but I liked the fact that they were, like I said, like a family, or they were a family, not like a family. They were a family, like a multi-ethnic family. I thought that was just fantastic. I love that. My last thought I had, thinking about why didn't this show sort of last and all this kind of stuff, and comparing this to G.I. Joe Easy, Transform Easy, Mask. I'm talking about the villains. And I think in this show, what holds this show back is how uninspired the villains are, unfortunately. Like, how about this?
Why? Because the guy's name is Glove?
It's bad.
No glove, no love.
And just at a glance right now, Diallo, you talking about, like, what if you were to write it today? I would make the villains be like this, like, ultra... like environmental group or something where they're against cybernetic enhancements, you know, like they're all quote unquote natural or something like that, so they don't shave. But but they would essentially be against cybernetic enhancements, whereas, you know, technology versus non-technology. Whereas these villains here, they just, man, they felt like rejects from every other 80s cartoon we've ever seen. And that, I think, is what really holds some of these shows back from really standing the test of time, because your protagonists here, the Bionic Six, they're fantastic. They're beautifully designed, beautifully acted. You know where they're coming from. You can get behind them, and then the villains are just a dud. And you're like, okay, I think that's why it doesn't last. But but that's just me. And again, and that is coming from someone who, this is their favorite show of the three that they watched, and I loved all three of them. So that, I don't know what that says.
I think tied into what you're saying with the villain design, and we talked about this with the other show. Was it Inhumanoids?
Yes.
Yeah,
we did.
And
no, it's Centurions.
Yeah, Centurions.
Oh yes, they had shitty ass. We
Yeah.
hated the villains there.
Yeah, and I think it was like tied into like sort of like the reverse, because I remember saying this with Centurions. The strength of the hero designs actually saved the toys.
Yeah.
But the case here, like it died because of the toy line not doing well, and even I watched the show, and like the toys barely existed in the stores when you went to go see them, but
they were not popular.
Yeah, but the villain figures just they weren't anything that you like kind of wanted to get. Like I just have a friend, he just bought the entire original run of Star Wars action figures. And I was looking at all the pictures, and I was like, man, I had a lot of the villain figures, right? Like, you had a lot of those stormtroopers, TIE fighter pilots, snow stormtroopers. I had the Imperial officers, and like they all looked cool. So I would get those as well. But in the case of this show, I just never really wanted to even bother. And then,
especially with the gimmick of like they're made of metal, but then there's like that one part that's translucent. So that's like their entire gimmick for the toys. Mm-hmm. How does that translate into Glove? Is his fucking hand translucent? Like, how does that translate into the villains? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the Glove figure looked like an old lady versus the guy in the cartoon who actually looked kind of cool.
Kind of cool, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I think to echo what you both are saying, if you look at so many of these cartoons, the villains are all the same. Like Centurions, same as this. You look at Toxic Crusaders, really, as much as I love it, the same. Captain Planet, the same. They've got like this kind of large in charge bad guy, and then they've got this bumbling, at least one character is a bumbling idiot, right, who makes goofy noises. And actually C.O.P.S, thankfully, doesn't go that route, but they do have some of those cliched element characters too, you know, where you're like, oh, you gotta have the dumb one in the group who makes the stupid choices, you know, but he's really strong, and it's
Beast
like,
Man.
Yeah, they're going with a playbook that Marvel and DC, I'm sure, you know, just made so well, but they just didn't think out those characters enough. So that's it.
First of all, I take umbrage with you calling out Toxic Crusaders, because I adored the grunts.
Dr. Killamoff?
No, I like the grunts. I thought the toxic grunt looking dudes. They were some of my favorite toys I've ever. They were some of my favorite toys that I never owned, and I loved their design.
Well, look, I
Umbrage.
own.
I take umbrage.
I actually own, and I'll have to send them to you. I own all those characters. They still have the entire Playmates line of the Toxic Crusaders figures, and I will give them. I will give some to you. I will send some up to you. But yeah, you know what? Maybe I take that back. Captain Planet, though, Captain Planet for sure had a lot of cliche kind of characters. It's just like one-offs, and they're not memorable. You know. G.I. Joe broke the mold with cliche characters when it came to cartoon TV shows. So
I mean, us doing this show, especially whenever we talk about the animated stuff, it does really put into perspective why Transformers and He-Man and G.I. Joe were the ones that really exploded. And I do think if you look at all three of them, they all had strong villains that we could all get behind. And yeah, Diallo, I'm like you, man. I had so many more Star Wars villain toys than I did the hero characters. And I think every great story needs a great villain, and doesn't matter how cool your hero is, if your villain is lame, that it'll never ever take off, in my opinion.
The best villain. Last thing I want to add in really quick before we wrap up Bionic 6. Did you guys the episode that I had recommended to you, the Valley of the Lost,
The super woke episode.
Yeah, the super woke Valley of Shadows. Sorry, the Valley of Shadows episode. It opens with the kids eating or about to eat something strange and green in the refrigerator, right? And it closes on the kids being served something strange and green from their dad with these like little raisins in it or something. I'm looking at it and I'm going, that's the same green surprise that in Better Off Dead, Lane Meyer's mom gives everybody, that moves on the plate and moves off the plate. I'm like, that's totally ripped off from Better Off Dead. I'm just telling you right now, look at the two scenes and you'll be like, yep, Zach's right. So there you go.
Well, I had a great segue into C.O.P.S talking about the action figures, but that was like 15 minutes ago that Zach brought up the action figures. So we'll just jump right into it. Hey everybody, Corey here. I just want to let you know that we'll be right back after these short messages.
On the winter solstice, when the lasting darkness threatens to descend upon the land of Atalan once united, Magi in training, Wilt Garen, and his shepherd, warrior in training, Bredain Adair, must find an ancient lost weapon before the ultimate ancient evil returns to the world of Eos. Hi there. I'm A. Diallo Jackson, writer of the First Noel's Chronicle podcast. The First Noel is an epic, family-friendly adventure told in serialized form. Think of it as Lord of the Rings meets, well, Christmas. Join us each week for the next thrilling chapter of The First Noel, now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, and all major podcasting apps, as well as Kindle Vella if you want to take a read. Thanks, and see you in Atalan. The winter tell is almost here.
And now, back to the show.
And now I got the helicopter above me. So sorry.
Yeah, I was.
Well, you guys are so close. It's probably the same goddamn helicopter.
I actually texted my friends as I was like, "Did it sound?" Because I could hear sirens and stuff in the background, and I was like, "Hey, something's going on over here. Can you tell me?" And they said,
Diallo's right here. He's right here.
Yeah,
Look,
right.
Yeah, just the camera
over.
pans over, and Dallas just right next to you.
No, they said that there's a man. A man. Suspect was last seen on Santa Monica Boulevard heading toward Armacos Avenue with a gun. So that's.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so that's why.
So behind the scenes, ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave all this in. Zach and Diallo actually both live in Santa Monica, so they're only a couple miles away from each other. So when Diallo had the helicopter, it's probably the same one that's now overhead of Zach. So it's great. I'm in Oregon though, so
hey, like Santa Monica was just listed as one of the crime capital of California. Recently, yeah. So it's rough streets out here, man.
Rough on them streets, baby.
Yeah.
Rough streets, baby.
Maybe you guys need some a central organization of police specialists to control the crime.
Nice segue.
Thank you. C.O.P.S, 1988 through 89. It's an acronym. It stands for Central Organization of Police Specialists. based on a line of Hasbro action figures designed by comic book artist Bart Sears, who I know Diallo knows.
I know Bart Sears.
You know him from Wizard Magazine, from when he used to teach you how to draw
Wizard
busty
Magazine covers.
women.
I actually know him more from, I know him from Wizard Magazine covers, but he did Justice League Europe.
Yep.
And he oh my god, like those
Or
issues.
his Power Girl.
Yeah, his Power Girl. He did
Bananas.
this epic arc with the Exterminators, I think they were called. So good. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. Side note, Bart Sears is actually probably one of my favorite comic book artists of all time. Who, like, I've barely read that much of his because I think he does a lot of this stuff to the side. So he basically, I'll take a little side tangent in 1 second just to sort of elaborate on it. But it was designed, a toy series designed by Bart Sears. C.O.P.S was a 65 episode animated series produced by Deke, which I said aired from 88 to 89. And so, side note, what happened? So I forgot the name of the company. It's like MGA or something lame like that.
Yeah,
It doesn't have a great
like
name.
MGA.
But it was like a
Generic.
toy think tank. Where basically, I guess, artists and stuff could submit toy ideas and then they could parlay that into something, right? And here, Bart Sears created this Cops and Robbers toy line, and the toys look very much like his design. And if you're aware of Bart Sears' style, you know what we're talking about. He's got a very specific chin and everything. And then they actually translated that into the show design as well. Zach is holding up his design, his toys of BB Vess and Big Boss. And we'll post these on our Zach will take pictures and we'll post them on Instagram.
What are they doing?
He's making them have sex. They're having sex. That's
How
that's
dare
what's
you? He's
happening.
giving him a piggyback ride. What is wrong with you, perverts?
The cartoon was rerun in 1993 under the new name Cyber Cops, to not be confused with the Cops reality show that debuted in 1989. The Topps animated series focuses on a team of highly trained, specialized police officers as they protect Empire City from Big Boss and his gang. It's a very, very simple premise, but it's fun to go off of. Before
I can't wait to go off on it.
Before I dive into some of the characters and everything, I will say that there's a connection between Cops and G.I. Joe. It's a shared universe, just like I believe G.I. Joe's a shared universe with Gem and Mask. And something else. Transformers, of course, but something else.
In Humanoids.
Yeah, there you go. In Humanoids, that's right. So a character on Cops, his name was Checkpoint, and he's related to Beachhead. And we find this out on the back of the toy cards, which were, so the G.I. Joe toys, their cards had a bio on the back written by Larry Hama. He wrote all of the Cops ones as well. So Beachhead's name in G.I. Joe, Beachhead's name was Wayne R. Sneeden. And then Checkpoint's name is Wayne R. Sneeden III. So he's his grandson. And it mentions that his grandfather worked for a specialized military organization. Unlike Zach and Diallo's voice actors on their shows, the voice actors on Cops, I actually don't really know from much. Ken Ryan, who played Agent Baldwin P. Vess, a.k.a. Bulletproof Vess. The only thing I know him from is he played a character in DEFCON 4, a movie that Zach and I reviewed, I think, in Season 2 of Podcasting After Dark. We reviewed it because it has the best movie poster of all time, but not the best movie to go with it, unfortunately. Big Boss was the main bad guy. Big Boss was voiced by Lynn Carlson, but he's imitating Edward G. Robinson the entire time. And if you don't know who that is, younger listeners, see, I'm gonna see the scene, copper, see, it's that voice.
Like shoes? Like cement shoes?
Yeah, that it's so. You know what it is. Right when you hear it, it's supposed to be a gangster voice, you know? But I actually like what he's doing personally. Paul De La Rosa is Berserko, who was the nephew of Big Boss. That guy's done like a lot of actually like TV and movie stuff, like not a lot of like voice work. He's the one that is Zach called out, like, you know, the dumb one that everyone, you know, every show of this time had to have somebody like that, you know. Dr. Bad Vibes, a name that, you know, clearly is not trying to hide anything. It's kind of on the nose. It was played by Ron Rubin. He's done like X-Men. He played Morph on X-Men. He did some voices on Beetlejuice. He was Artemis on Sailor Moon, the American version, 95 to 2000. A lot of Care Bear stuff.
He sounds like he's in the Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem cover band for
Dude, totally.
Right?
for the Muppets. Yeah.
And then like so again, like I said, not a lot of people that I actually recognize, unlike the other two shows we've discussed. PJ Longarm O'Malley, voiced by John Stocker. We have Rex Bowser Pointer, voiced by Nick Nichols. We have one Sundown, voiced also by Lynn Carlson. We do have a female, Susie Mirage Young, voiced by Elizabeth Hanna. And honestly, it goes on, and I skimmed through the voice work, and I did not recognize anybody. I'll throw it to you guys. Anybody jump out at you for anything?
No, not that I'm familiar with. You know, nothing. And I actually find that very refreshing to have such a huge cast. Because this has a really big cast, if you think about it. There's a lot of characters on this show.
Yeah.
And for them mostly, for most of them to be unknown to me anyways, yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, me too. Honestly, and they did a great job. They all did great jobs on the voices. It's just, you know, it's just weird looking through this and not seeing a Frank Welker or an Oppenheimer, you know, that all the stables that we're so used to at this point.
Yeah. I also want to point out really quick, it's Cops and Crooks. Cops and Crooks, that's the toy line.
That's right. And Crooks is also an acronym as well, although I'm not, hold on. Yep, I'm not quite sure what that stands for. But I'd say the toys for this were a big selling point. For me personally, Zach's holding them up. They are freaking huge. They're not G.I. Joe size.
They're 5 inches, I think.
They're like in humanoid size for the main characters there. They're not quite, but I'd say they're almost Centurion size. But they are beefy. They are like solid plastic. Their play gimmick was that, like the RoboCop toys, they came with a gun that you could feed those paper poppers through. Those
caps.
Yeah, there you go. Those paper rolled up caps through.
Caps for cops.
And it was great, dude. I miss that smell, that sulfur smell from back in the day and everything. I love that. Couldn't do it nowadays.
Asbestos-filled sulfur smell.
Yeah, exactly. But that was the gimmick. There was they put out the helicopter, they put out the car and everything. They had a bunch of the cops. They also had a bunch of the crooks. My personal favorite was Buttons McBoom Boom. He kind of like had this zoot suit that you could open up, a double-breasted jacket that you open up, and he had machine guns in his chest, so he's probably kind of like a cyborg himself, kind of like Bulletproof Vest is. But there was an overall aesthetic of like modern. What is zoot suits from? That's from the 30s, right? 20s and 30s.
Yeah, 20s and 30s. Yeah.
So it has that style. It's like a modern zoot suit style with cybernetic enhancements that I really enjoyed. Even the vehicles themselves, you could tell, were kind of tried to be designed after like that era of cars and everything. And then the way Big Boss talks, it's supposed to be like Al Capone in that whole
1920s
era. Yeah, it's supposed to be all of that, but just in modern times. And I honestly loved it. I love the toys. I love the cartoon, but I think as a kid, I'd love the toys more. I watched the cartoon. I like that it's bookended as a case file. Every episode is a case file. I think that's really fucking cool for them to do that. And then even have like a roster at the end of it that I thought was, kind of cool too, for you to get to know the characters. But as much as I watched the cartoon, I gotta say I probably played with the toys more. And I also read the comic book. I think DC Comics put out the comic as well. I had the very first issue. I think I still have it in my mom's basement. But this is one of those shows, rewatching it for TV Obscura, it's one of those shows that I haven't really thought about in like 30 years. But rewatching it, I realized how big it was for me as a kid and how much I loved it as a kid. And I will say that I very much enjoyed Bionic Six more of the three that we watched, but I loved all three of them that we did watch. And I loved this. I was like, you know what? I see why I gravitated towards as a kid and everything. My only kind of pushback was that in the first episode, it was pretty violent. Zach and I were talking about it offline. And then they had actual guns with bullets in it to kind of illustrate Bulletproof Vest's chest and everything. But after that, they don't really have a lot of guns on here. Even the one character that has a bazooka, it's like a laser thing. There's not a lot of guns. And I actually watched 3 episodes because I was trying to find out if the guns were going to be lasers or if they were going to stay bullets. And I never saw another gun again. And you know what? Didn't bother me. Didn't bother me whatsoever because every single episode was highly, highly entertaining. So, Diallo, any thoughts or what were your connections to cops back in the day, and what'd you think of it now?
Just real quick, I feel like it's interesting that you connected like cops with guns because it's really only an American thing.
Very true. Yeah, good call.
True.
Good point.
True.
Yeah,
good point.
Because I think the show, I never even contemplated that idea till you just said it now, because the show is strong just on them being cops, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's not about like guns or so. Like I like guns and enough, but I mean, they're so violent.
Yeah.
But yeah,
they're so final.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like the they're like the last resort, sort of, and there's no storytelling in a lot of gun play. But anyways, the Cops is very much like on a very personal level. I think I brought this up maybe in the last episode or one of the last animated ones. It's a very sort of like special-ish cartoon for me because I think it was like one of the first and last cartoons I watched in my transition from being like a teenager to an adult. So
To a man.
Yeah.
To a man.
I was a man,
baby.
a man.
Man.
I was a 17-year-old boy when I went away to college, which is I always think about that. It's kind of weird. My parents sent me 3,000 miles away as a teenager to go
to Vermont, right?
Yeah, to go to school. And I still was very much into watching cartoons, obviously. And again, I like gatekeeping. Like now, everyone does it. But back then, I remember, when I went to school back there, there was no cable. They only got like 2 channels, and like anything that you watch, pretty much you had to watch in the lounge, right? So in the afternoon, I remember going to the lounge and seeing what cartoons we got, which weren't very many, but then Cops was on. I was like, oh, check this show out. I liked it. And I'll never forget this freaking guy comes in and he's like, oh, you're watching cartoons? And it was just like, yeah.
Did he have a sweater tied around his neck?
Yeah. His name was Kip. And no.
He was a douche.
His name is. Actually, I think I do remember I can't remember the guy's name, but all the girls loved him. So maybe I should.
Ricky Hargrove.
Maybe I shouldn't have been watching cartoons. But
his name was Brett. What's the new Supreme Court justice?
Kavanaugh.
His name was Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah, his name was Brett Kavanaugh.
Did you boof?
He likes his beer. I remember. I just like my beer. Okay.
Diallo, you want to boof? What? What did you say?
But I'll never forget him coming in and like you know,
Douche.
like
What a
saying that,
douche.
and it was this instant for me where I like it just kind of tarnished like this thing I love. So I watched it as much as I could, but then when I came home for the summer, I remember watching it then. I watched it pretty religiously, but it's a funny one because I couldn't even tell you what happened in episodes.
Yeah.
It was just I just liked the whole vibe of it. And it was and again, so woke. It to me, like having the main character be like a black guy that was so authoritative and cool and but not in any sort of stereotypical way that blacks are normally portrayed when we do get to be on screen. That was, and I like sort of responded to that subconsciously, I think. Fighting crime in a future time. And
baby.
It just I loved the show, like the breadth of characters and designs. It was like again, you brought up Larry Hama, but it was sort of like a cop's version of G.I. Joe, not in the
Exactly.
exact style. I mean, there's even a character that looked like Junkyard, I think, with the dog.
Yep.
Yeah.
With the dog.
The
He was
robotic
great.
dog, yeah.
I love that guy.
Me too. He's cool.
Yeah, so it was like that, but it was more cartoony, the Bart Sears, which like years later when I knew I knew Bart Sears designed that, I was like, oh, that's wild, because again, go back to those Justice League Europe. If anybody ever had a chance to read those, he kind of revolutionized the ways like Captain Atom was drawn and some other stuff. So
He revolutionized the
yeah,
way.
I was leaving that. I was trying to leave the Power Girl.
I know what you're trying to do.
But yeah, so it was a great show. It was like the dusk of my teenage cartoon watching era, and then but it also kind of matched that because it was going into the 90s, and I think cartoons were changed from there on out, changed quite a bit. I think we've talked about that a little bit in the past with like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and stuff. There was like a new sort of like style of animation that was starting to take root, so it was like kind of the end of my innocence when it came to cartoons, and from there took a little hiatus, came back some years later with some other stuff. So love C.O.P.S. and
how do you think it holds up now when you're watching it now?
Oh, it was fine. I just like I don't ever recall seeing the premiere before, so I kind of, it's funny how you were saying you didn't care about like Bionic Six and how they got their powers, whatever. I'd never actually thought about how like Bulletproof became Bulletproof. He just was just kind of like G.I. Joe characters, just kind of that's what they were. But I think like with Bionic Six, when I watched it, it wasn't like the first episode I was like wondering what happened. It was over time watching it, I started to think, and I guess watching C.O.P.S, I might have had that same thought, I guess. I don't know. But,
and it's cool because like they actually did have the first episode showing you how the team got together, and I liked how I forgot his name, but the guy with the bazooka, I liked how his costume is just what the police in Philadelphia look like. Like it was just the same thing. He's wearing the same thing. I thought that was really cool.
It grounded it in like copness, you know.
Yeah, because at the same time, I don't know, Diallo, if you're gonna remember this. Do you remember? You remember Epic Comics, Marvel's? Yeah. Do you remember in the mid '80s a comic book called Stalkers, drawn by Mark Texiera?
Texiera, Tierra, I think it is.
Tierra, yeah. The very first 2 issues of Stalkers, I loved that as a kid, and it was like this paramilitary police organization. In the first 2 issues, like they all die at the end of it from a nuclear explosion. It's real dark and everything. But as a kid, I kind of related Stalkers and C.O.P.S being sort of the same thing with these like paramilitary looking police officers and everything, but that was just a shot in the dark if you happen to remember that comic book at all.
I don't remember Stalkers. It's you went deep on that one. I don't remember
I
that
did.
at all.
That was a comic book obscura right there.
I'm looking it up right now. Oh, Mark Verheiden wrote it, it looks like.
I think he did
a lot of the aliens
stuff for you. I actually met him. I met him at a con like in the 90s. He signed my my trade paperback of the original Alien comics.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he actually, I might be making this up, but I actually think he wrote for a lot of, I think he wrote some Battlestar Galactica.
I don't think you're
episodes.
making that up. I think that's something you and I have discussed way back in the day when we first sort of like started hanging out, and I think I talked about the Alien comic books, and you're like, oh, that guy wrote for BSG and stuff. Yeah. I think he was a big time anyway. Side tangent. Go check out Stalkers. Go check that out. And
I know Mark Tierra mostly from doing it. He did I think he did a good run on Wolverine and did some Ghost Rider, I think. Anyways.
I love his Sabretooth as well. How he draws Sabretooth and Birdie. Zach, cops fighting crime in a future time. I loved when Big Boss says crime's a wasting.
Yeah, see, yeah. I love this show. I've always loved this show. I have the box set from Mill Creek. I got it for you can get it for like $20 on eBay.
Oh, nice.
Highly recommended. I have seen almost every episode of this show. The pilot is phenomenal in my opinion, and the toy line is fantastic. They are large versions of the G.I. Joes, right down to the Kung Fu grip, everything. More detailed, more articulate than, same articulation as the 3 3/4 line, but yeah, I think they're like 5 inches.
Of solid plastic, baby.
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts. One is, like Diallo said, having your lead character be a black guy in the late 80s, early 90s for a cartoon is kind of like unheard of. I can't think of any other show where that was. I mean, my biggest like action hero that I saw on screen was Action Jackson, was Carl Weathers. And then I see this and I'm like, it's Action Jackson, And I mean that in the highest level of like respect and sincerity. I think it was awesome to see that. I also think it was cool watching 2 episodes, Bionic Six and C.O.P.S. Both the lead characters are African American. It was like, oh, that's surprising for mainstream American cartoons. The first episode of a cartoon series. They save that usually. Roadblock was like, had a big story arc in like episode 8 or something of G.I. Joe. They wait, or Stalker too. He wasn't the main guy.
And how refreshing is it that BP Vess doesn't rap the entire time?
Well, he doesn't. Yeah, and he's just like a legit cool guy. There's no reference to who he is. So like he's the FBI guy, and he's working with a bunch of white people, which is actually pretty funny because it's like everybody else in the town is white except for him. And I think they introduce other ethnic characters as the time goes on, like other ethnicities, like. Like I think there's an Asian character. Like there's all these tokens, of course, because it's it prescribes to that formula. But at least the lead guy was like, I look at him and I'm like, dude, they could redo this as a movie now, and I could see a million dudes playing this. Back in the day when Wesley Snipes was on fire, that would be Wesley Snipes right there. Like when he was at the top of his game, right? A couple things that I noticed. I'm like, the music sounds really familiar. It sounds like real Ghostbusters to me. Well, like I said, with Bionic Six, Thomas Chase and Steve Rucker, they also worked on C.O.P.S, and so did Shuki Levy and Haim Sabin. So you've got some A caliber composers working on this show,
which is interesting because I found this intro, I always loved the animation, and I love that it told this cool like ongoing story. It's almost like a one take shot type of thing.
Yeah.
But the music is so forgettable to me in the intro here.
Well, it's the incidental music is what reminded me of Ghostbusters, because if you listen to the incidental music in the real Ghostbusters show, it's almost the same, like that. Din, 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 din,
yeah,
din,
din, din,
din,
din,
din,
din,
din,
din,
like
din.
very subtle, very subtle stuff, and I loved it all. I mean, I couldn't get enough of the toy line back in the day. They had this one character, he wasn't called Big Tex, but he was like this big kind of country western dude, sheriff that they got from Texas, I think. He was so cool looking. Like every single figure looked different, unique. had great accessories. Your Boom Boom character, like the guns come out of his chest. How awesome is that?
And he comes with Buttons McBoom Boom came
Tommy
with
gun.
a Tommy gun that went into the guitar case. Like,
yes,
it was so awesome. The characters were so
Before
good.
El
Man.
Mariachi, well, actually, El Mariachi got that from Django, the original Western from the 70s. If you've never seen the original Django, go check it out. It's awesome. Top to bottom, I love the violence. I love the level of violence because it's like, let's be honest, guys. These are criminals and they're cops, so there's got to be violence. Cars are blowing up.
Yeah.
You don't see people jumping out like they did in G.I. Joe. People are dying in car crashes on the freeway. It is violent as hell. When BP gets hit, like when he gets injured
brutal.
that first time, it was intense.
I was
He's got a giant brick on his face.
He had a brick on his face. I like how they had to remove it. They're like, "Who is this? Oh my God, it's BP."
That was so brutal. I was watching it like, wait, like, does he die? And they like his twin brother comes because there's no way he survives this.
No, and the way he kind of
Just give
has
him a
his
new torso.
transformation,
Yeah.
right. The way he has his transformation arc is brilliant. It was a setup all along, and it's so you can watch the pilot. It's 2 episodes actually, 40 minutes long. It's so good, and like Corey said, I love the narration in the case files. It feels like you're watching like Law and Order for kids.
Yeah.
It's just so cool. It's I love this show. So it's my favorite of the 3. And it was Bodie's favorite of the 3 too.
I was
He loved
okay.
one.
I was going to ask what was the Bodie rating on that one. This is his favorite.
Top to bottom, it was C.O.P.S, Bionic Six, Battle of the Planets, which I kind of expected.
Okay. I was looking at your dog behind you, and I lost my train of thought. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. Zach, did you own any of the vehicles? I only own the figures.
I only own the figures too. I remember the vehicles kind of being expensive. The figures were expensive because they were bigger.
Because the figures were so big themselves, that's gonna facilitate the vehicles being giant as well. And I do remember them being like massive.
It was limited. You can actually, I've gone on eBay just, purely out of sport and to see what they're going for. You can still get the figures and the vehicles for a pretty decent price. Shout out again, BP. He comes with like, a suitcase and you open up the suitcase. It's a steel suitcase that has a handcuff that attaches to his wrist. There's like a cell phone in there. It's all like
tech stuff.
You know how like Star Wars would do that too. You couldn't take it off of the thing, but it was like kind
molded,
of 3-dimensional. Mold of like a cell phone and a top secret file and some other stuff in there.
But his jacket is soft goods, right? Like it's
his jacket is soft and it's like velvet on the inside and fabric cotton on the outside.
Knowing what I know about toys, dude, toy manufacturing, having soft goods like that in there, that's a big deal, dude. Like that takes extra work and everything to do,
The whole thing is just awesome. The whole toy line is great. So bingo bango, done.
Bingo bango bongo.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, offline, Diallo sent us pictures of his Gatchaman figures, and those are got to get your Gatchaman guys. Those are rad too.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll have to post all of those. I'm sure I have my Buttons McBoom Boom in my mom's basement somewhere, but I wish I had it here. I really, really do.
I have no Bionic Six figures because those things were actually pretty heavy.
Yeah, because they were made of metal.
Heavy.
They were made of metal except for that one plastic part. So final thoughts on all 3. I'll just kick it off. Love C.O.P.S because it's such a nostalgic love for it. I think it holds up well. I think it's great. Everything we just said, the toy line was fantastic. The designs of the characters are fantastic. And I honestly love the fact that the lead is an African-American. It's just, that's nice. It would have been nice to have more African-Americans in the roster, but I'm happy that the lead was. But for me, the breakout was Bionic Six. I never expected to enjoy it as much as I did. I think the character designs and the animation, the in-show animation really helps to elevate it. I think the only thing that really holds it back is the villain designs. And I am so happy that I finally got to see Battle of the Planets, aka G-Force, aka Gatchaman, maybe not in its proper form, but I got enough to see it to know that I would like to see more, and I would like to see it in its proper form. Now, that being said, I do find it sad that, like Diallo said, the rights went back in 2015 or something like that, or 10. So, like, right now, we don't quite have something to latch on to, but I do have high hopes that this will lead the way for maybe a resurgence in America, because, I mean, everyone who grew up on anime knows what these characters are, the way they look and everything. They're iconic, and I think just that alone, nostalgia alone, I think that could be the easiest one to reboot here in America, would be G-Force / Gatchaman. Diallo, final thoughts on all three?
Yeah, so if I'm ranking them, I put C.O.P.S at 3, I put Bionic 6 at 2, and then obviously Battle Planets, Gatchaman at 1. But that's like me comparing 3 of my favorite foods. Not doesn't mean anyone is terrible or any less.
Yeah.
I loved all of them. I was really, when I knew you guys were picking the shows that you picked, I was really excited because I already have seen them, and I obviously love, especially Bionic 6, I love to death. I actually would be really interested in sort of seeing a reboot of Bionic 6, quite like they did with like Voltron, that was on Netflix.
Yes,
Yeah.
that Voltron cartoon is probably the best example of a reboot that just it takes everything you wanted to know more of,
Yeah.
and then trims the fat of the stuff that didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you. I think Bionic 6 would make a great reboot, because it would also give you a chance to redesign those villains and
Yeah,
everything.
exactly. Yeah, Voltron just made everything that didn't work, they made work, and it took you on a journey. And
Oh,
I
God.
love that's one of my all-time favorite like reboots of anything next to Battlestar Galactica.
Same, buddy.
You know?
Battlestar Galactica, same,
Yeah,
my friend.
and then obviously Gatchaman is like, that's like, I find when I'm doing ears, there's elements of that in there. My team flies around in a jet, and while we were doing the show, I actually was on the internet, and I finally found the Blu-ray exclusive extra edition of Gatchaman that has the original, like the redubbed 105 episodes. I just purchased it.
Nice.
Wait, did you find it on? Was it on eBay or Amazon?
It was on Amazon. Yeah, they're probably on eBay, but I was looking on Amazon. I found it.
Can you send me the link when we get off?
Yeah, well, there was. I think I said there was the last one.
Oh, you son of a bitch!
Yeah,
You
it was
son of a
a lot.
bitch.
It was 100. It was 100. It was a lot.
Oh God! Well, never mind.
But I just was like, wait a minute. I haven't watched. I've been kind of thinking about wanting to watch it. I might have looked it up like a few months ago, so I just pulled the trigger this time. So, anyways,
Nice.
I absolutely love it. Can't wait to watch them all again. And Gatchaman is my one.
Zach, what are your final thoughts? We know what Bodhi thought of them. Although he didn't really say Bionic 6. Was he just kind of whatever, lukewarm on it?
Yeah, it wasn't as like he was kind of into it, but not as heavily into it as C.O.P.S.
I'm kind of
C.O.P.S.
shocked, actually.
C.O.P.S. was. I was surprised too. I'm like, when there's a scene where JD/IQ walks through a fence with this amulet that he's
Yeah.
wearing. And I'm like, isn't that cool? And he's like, yeah, it's okay. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, you've just been wowed by everything else. Final thoughts. Besides Bodhi, I love just the C.O.P.S. I love. Bionic 6, I was reminded of how much I loved it. And Battle of the Planets was a pleasant surprise, and I was so happy that it lived up to the expectation after not seeing it all these decades later. I'm so glad we covered all three of these shows, and they all fit so well together. The great teams. And there's some teens in there that are great too. So there you go.
Touche.
I'm happy overall.
Me too. This was fun. This was great to get back into the swing of things after such a wild month. Zach and I will discuss it more on Wrap Up After Dark this past month and everything. But it was great to get back to this. It was great to podcast with you guys and just get back on the horse. It felt wonderful, and this was a great way to do it. All three of these shows were absolutely fantastic, almost as fantastic as the shows that both of you all produce podcasting wise. Diallo, what's going on with First Noel Chronicles, my friend?
There's been an unofficial pause on it because I've been too depressed to function and exist.
It's okay. It's understandable.
But no, I have the next few chapters getting ready to slide out and launch. My current plan is to finish book 1 of the podcast series and have that be a standalone as I'm finishing the actual novel, and then First Noel can live there for people to find and wait for the rest of the book to come out. So that's my my current plan, and just keeping on with all the other stuff. Starting to work on some new stuff and having some new ideas, and just watching the world go round and round and or burn to the ground. So
A little bit of both.
yeah,
A little bit of both. I feel you, buddy.
Yeah.
It's as a creative, and I think all three of us are artists. All three of us are creative. All three of us are sensitive people and everything. And yeah, man, sometimes life just fucking gets you, and I totally understand. But you always produce a great show. I think First Noel Chronicles is fantastic, and I hope everyone supports it and go checks it out. Especially since Diallo just purchased his giant balloon. He needs money. Go send this man some money, guys.
I've made some money with First Noel. I'm officially a professional author, but
and you spent it all on the
Gatchaman.
Zach, what's going on with what's going on? That's all right, buddy. I have a massive Amazon credit card bill that I have to pay. And it's like 80% Blu-rays. So I feel you, brother. I feel you. Zach, what's going on with $2 late fee these days? We're wrapping up August, I guess. What's coming in September?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's been busy over at $2 late fee. We did some kind of out of the box episodes, Tales from the Video Store for the free feed versus our Patreon. We got a great interview coming up with Craig Saffin. He is the composer for Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins, The Last Starfighter, Legend of Billie Jean, and he contributed probably one of the best songs to the Thief soundtrack directed by Michael Mann. So we're doing a little James Caan tribute and then a follow-up interview with Craig Saffin in the month of September. And yeah, I just booked out October and now close to November. Diallo's going to be on in November. We'll talk about that later. And then December is, we've got it all booked up.
Oh,
looking at you're looking at
that was the first time we've heard her. I'll keep that in. I'll leave that in. Okay.
She barked at her own reflection. So
that's so cute. She's honestly, she's guys and gals. Zach, new dog, just got a new dog today. We recorded this entire episode, not a peep from that sweet little girl, and
she sat by my side almost the entire time.
Yeah, so I'm so happy you got a dog, buddy. It's I can't wait for Myra and I to get one. We need to get one that's hypoallergenic because Myra has horrible allergies to dogs. So.
Well, if you want to hear the whole story of how this dog came into our lives, check out our Wrap Up After Dark episode that will be we're recording it actually 2 days after we record this.
Yeah.
So it'll be up for this month, and you guys will enjoy that story and more from Corey and I. And
you might not enjoy my stories as much, but we'll get into it. And now that we're back in the studio, back on the wagon, I've scheduled out pretty much all through October for Podcasting After Dark.
Yeah.
And so next month, Zach and I are tackling 2 Patreon chosen films. So one from Aaron and one from Robert Ortiz. And so we're going to stack them both back to back. Zach's going to tackle Aaron's, and I'm going to break down Robert's. And keep a lookout for what those are going to be. But if you want us to review a movie of your choosing, then join that tier on Patreon, the highest level, and we will do that. You can also check out the next to highest level tier and for the Carpenter Factor, the Tour de Force title that Zach named. Very great title, by the way. And right now we are covering the Carpenter Factor, which is John Carpenter's films, pretty much this year and next year. We're going through them movie by movie in order of his catalog. We have some guests on those episodes with us and everything, and it's a lot of fun, and we're having a great time doing it. And it's awesome to sort of look at movies individually, but also look at them as a part of a whole catalog. And that's what we're really trying to do with the Carpenter Factor. So go check out Podcast After Dark on Patreon. Zach and I have a lot of stuff going on over there. Every month, all kinds of good shit happening.
So much good stuff.
So much good stuff.
It's the good stuff.
It's the good.
By the way, and you can cut this if you want, but I just thought that for September for TV Obscura, we could do a back to school episode, and we could choose either school TV shows or school like after school specials.
Oh man, I know a few after school specials off the top of my head.
I'm 100% on board with that. I am not cutting this. Zach just called it. We're doing back to school next month.
I already got my episode.
Yeah,
I got mine too.
Nice. I don't, but I'm sure I will. And then the following month will be October, so we're gonna do some kind of Halloween special, whether it's like scary shows or we're gonna do Halloween specials. But we have time. We have time to figure it out. We have time.
Yeah.
So, but Diallo, just as an FYI, I scheduled out through October as well. So
we still haven't done Werewolf. That was one of the first things we talked about.
And I think we were waiting for the Blu-ray to come out.
Okay.
And I think it's never coming out.
Yeah.
See every discussion we've ever had about music rights on TV shows, and guys and gals, this is getting fucking ridiculous. I get it. Everyone should get paid. I totally understand. But if it means your piece of property like Werewolf just disappears into obscurity, like who does that help? How does that help anybody? You know what I mean?
No one.
So yeah,
it's
Diallo,
like it's all the accountants and stuff. I mean, look at what's going down with the HBO Max now.
Oh my God, the whole HBO Max thing is a fucking debacle. I told Myra yesterday, cancel HBO Max. That was one of my favorite streaming services.
It was,
and now.
Yeah, it
dead.
rose to the top for almost everybody. Everybody's like, yeah, that's my favorite one, and it's just you're watching it just.
To die. You're watching it die
crazy.
on the vine.
It's crazy.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So streaming, it's insane. But yeah, Diallo, I'm with you, buddy. I'm 100% on board with discussing Werewolf if we can actually somehow get a hold of that fucking show. But yeah, guys and gals, check out everything that's going on over at the BFOP network. Check out all the shows that we have: Talking Back, Blast from Our Past, Throwback Trivia Takedown. You know the routine: Cartwright Seinfeld podcast, Blast from Our Past. All those shows, but also check out the friends of our network. Check out $2 Late Fee. Check out I got tongue-tied, sorry. Check out First Noel Chronicles. Check out Ready to Retro, Donna of the Dead, Manic Movie Monday, all of our friends. Give me back my action movies, give me back my horror movies. We have a great collection of friends in the podcasting world, and we love everybody, and we appreciate everyone, and we appreciate everyone who's producing content on the regular basis, because you guys are the heroes of the world, and the people who pay for it, the Patreon members, you are the heroes of the heroes. So thank you all so much.
Indeed.
And as always,
catch you on the obscure side.
Be sure to subscribe to Podcasting After Dark and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Support Podcasting After Dark on Patreon. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Podcasting After Dark. And visit us next time for another installment of Podcasting After Dark with Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer.
Hello!
La la la.
I'm Adam,
And I'm Corey.
and we are the hosts of Cartwright, a Seinfeld podcast. We are breaking down every single episode of Seinfeld as we watch it, reliving this amazing show.
That's right, it's a trip down memory lane for all of us 90s kids out there. You can find Cartwright, a Seinfeld podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and Patreon.
La la la.